Do you get it? Right? I've seen this like 8 times. Really powerful stuff. Let me unpack a little bit, and then I actually want to, we'll move on from this because that's the video. If you know Abe Viesca Sr. at our church, he's been around a long time. He knows this by heart, this Teddy Roosevelt Man in the Arena thing. And he has come up to me several times recently, especially as we were going through the CDP series, especially when we're doing the sermons in the summer and having different people come on stage. And if you know Abe, he's a member of the Tea Party. He's very out there. It's like, hey, I'm probably the most conservative guy in this church, but he also has some gay nephews, right? And so he would come up to me after one of these services. I'm feeling very vulnerable, right? And he'd go, Teddy Roosevelt said, right? And he would rattle this thing off to him. He's done this to me several times. I think part of it's because he doesn't remember. But I really appreciate hearing this because he's saying, I fully support, even though I'm conservative politically, I fully support trying to figure this out because on another level, it matters to me because we've had to figure this out as a family, okay? And it's like, it's nice to see my church trying to figure this out so I can live a more integrated life. And he's saying, good for you that you're not waiting with your hand on the knob, right? That even though with my own dolphin shaming voice of, I don't know enough, and well, that's not the owl voice. It's just like I don't have it all together enough, and it's just like this is actually going to the way I heard God say it's going to cost you your reputation. It's worth. It's just like, well, even so, get into the arena because that's daring greatly, and in my case, right, that's what it's all about. I love what she was saying about empathy. And shame, and I was thinking again, because I'm really still leading on this, how do we figure out how to apply what we believe as Christians fairly and evenly to Christians who are gay? When she was saying, when you talk about race, the reason why we don't want to talk about race is because the people who run the show have privilege, and as soon as they start thinking about how their privilege costs somebody else to be less privileged, it feels shameful. And so I hear that and I go, straight, gay. So how easy it is for those of us who are straight, who have everything set up so it matches us and it fits us, and then to hear from someone who's gay or is related to someone who's gay saying, well, the current status quo actually causes us pain. We come up with Bible verses and all that kind of stuff, and there's a place for that. But what's hiding, I think, in the midst of that is like the shame of, I don't want to think that having things comfortable for me as a straight person who may not know or love anyone who's gay is actually causing somebody else pain, or to actually fill them full of shame so that they feel like they have no place here in church. You know what I'm saying? This is so relevant, I know to me, and it's not just on this particular issue for me. She was talking about the 2 shaming messages. You're never going to be good enough, and who do you think you are? And she said 99% of the time the person saying this is us, right? It's you. So it's too easy to kind of look outside of ourselves and blame the culture, the organization, our family. But I'll tell you the truth. It may have started outside of me. It may have been my father's voice primarily. But I've internalized that. My dad's dead now, right? And I've lived apart from my father for the last 30 plus years. I do it to myself, right? But I keep saying, well, it's my dad. It's like, no, at some point, that's me talking. And how do we deal with this? So again, the reason why Ryan and I were bringing the shame together with the audacious outcome is to say, there is this force inside of us that unless we understand how it works and then how to get away from it, we will never pursue our audacious outcomes, because to do that is to dare greatly, is to be in the arena, is to risk failure. Then she says, guilt is, I'm sorry I made a mistake. Shame is, I'm sorry I am a mistake. What an awful burden if you've grown up feeling like you're a mistake. Right? Like you're this unwanted person. Now, not very proudly. Sometimes I've used that to my advantage. Right? So I remember one time, my brother that I have the most issues with, I happened to be home and at my parents' house, and he walks in, and my brother has no problem feeling really good about himself, right? To the point of everyone else is not very good. And so he goes, isn't it interesting how mom and dad had only one really good-looking child? Okay? And so I'm like, oh, man, right? And so he's like, so he's just kind of basking in his own aura, right? And I go, well, that might be true, but at least the rest of us were planned. Okay? And so all of a sudden this 6'1", fully, full of himself for a person, his whole countenance changed. What are you talking about? I was planned. I go, no, you weren't. Okay? What do you mean I wasn't planned? I go, all right, let's just look at facts. Okay, I'm being very owl here, right? I said, so first there was Melinda, and then 17 months later I was born, right? And then there's a 5-year gap, and then you were born, and then our youngest brother was born like 17 months after this. So what accounts for the gap between you and me? I don't know. I guess that was the plan. I go, actually, I said, Mom had several miscarriages, and she and Dad decided, I guess I can't get pregnant again, and you were an accident. Okay? And then after they had you, it's like, don't get on my bad side, right? I said, and then after they had you, they go, well, gosh, there's such a gap between Ken and Rob that we should try again, and that's why they had Jimmy, right? So here's this 28-year-old man who's like, that's not true. I go, ask Mom, right? So he leaves, Mom, was I planned? Right? So he goes to the other end of the house to find out, the truth. And he comes like, Mom said I was planned. And I said, what do you think Mom's going to say to you? Right? And he goes, so he reaches out and he goes, it hurts, but it's the truth, and I can always count on you to tell me the truth, right? Right? So it's funny. So there are times now, years later, when he doubts me, and I go, Rob, who told you the truth about, I go, right? It's like, all right, so I'm not proud of that. In the moment, I was proud, okay? But to say to anybody, you weren't planned, you were a mistake, you were an accident, right? That's a tough burden to carry. And I like what she was saying. I don't know if the different genders related to this, that shame feels different depending on your gender. So shame is do it all, do it perfectly, and never let them see you sweat. Do you women relate to that? Right? Men, it's don't be perceived as weak. And I thought it was really powerful when that guy went to the book signing, and he goes, why don't you ever talk about men? And he's like, well, because I only study women. He goes, well, that's convenient. What did he mean by that? That's convenient. Based on what else he said about his wife and his 3 daughters.
Just shirking the issue.
Well, more than that. Who did he say was the most shaming voice in his life that says, don't be weak? The women, right? So how convenient as a woman that you don't study how women are the primary source of shame in many men's life. That they'd rather see me die on my white horse than fall to the ground. Okay? So we have this not so great relationship. And then I love this, like she said, there are 3 ingredients in the Petri dish that make shame grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment, right? And that's all the toxic shame, both shameful and shameless. What's the antidote that if you put this in the Petri dish, that shame will actually die? What's the antidote? Empathy, okay? And the voice of empathy is when someone else is being vulnerable and sharing their limitation, we say, me too, okay? Maybe not exactly the same way, but I identify with that, okay? Now again, apply this to everything our church has been going through. All this kind of stuff is when we develop greater empathy because of healthy shame. I could be straight and I could empathize with someone who's gay. okay? I say, I struggle too. As a heterosexual, I have issues with my sexuality, right? It's not an easy thing. So it's just like, yeah, right? And then vice versa. I as a gay person, hopefully you also have empathy and you say, okay, so I can empathize why some of the straight people are struggling with accepting me because they feel like they would have to endorse being immoral. I get that. As a Christian, I'm not comfortable with embracing immorality. So this empathy is not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. And that's what we're trying to pursue here at the church. But this is beyond straight and gay. I mean, there are families here who have kids with special needs. And most families don't. And so it'd be really easy for the families who don't have kids with special needs to just go, not me too. Like, I don't have an autistic kid. I don't have a kid who has seizures. And so too bad for you, great for me. Not empathy, right? The body of Christ is one body, has many different parts. And when one part suffers, what happens to the rest of the other parts? They feel the pain, right? When one part actually is rejoicing, the whole body should rejoice. Empathy, right? That's built in. That's the gospel. And yet toxic shame takes us away from empathy. Toxic shame says, I can't feel because I'm not you. That's not my struggle. That's not my issue. Too bad for you. Great for me. Okay? Thought that was really important. All right, so I want to end with this. And where's the mic? You can be my runner. All right. One of my audacious outcomes the last couple years in a different role than being a follower of Christ is the father of my daughter. Okay? And I've shared with you that there is one person right now on this earth that I'm aware of that I am the most impatient, annoyed person with, and that's with my daughter. Okay? And very, very unabashedly, I realize that my tone and my instinctive attitude when I'm trying to work with my daughter, it's the tone and attitude that my father gave to me that made me feel distant from my father, okay? And so I didn't like it growing up, so I thought, okay, when I become a dad, I'm never going to be like that. But I can't keep blaming my dad for that. I'm the father of this child. And so ever since our daughter had homework, okay, she was like, Dad, can you help me? It's like, okay, sure. And then we sit down, and then after a while, I was like, why don't you understand? Like, in the beginning, she was unfortunately going to elementary school when it was No Child Left Behind. And so there was such a pressure on making sure that a certain percentage of the students passed the test that the teachers stopped teaching the theory of relationship of numbers, and they just memorized the answers of math problems, okay? So she goes through this whole thing of 7 plus 7 is 14. She doesn't understand the concept of 7 things plus 7 things. It's 14 is the answer to 7 plus 7. So we struggled with that, memorizing all those answers, and then she got to subtraction. What's 14 minus 7? Because she was never taught the relationship of numbers, she didn't automatically go, like, I'm like, Janessa, it's like, what did we talk about? 7 plus 7 is 14, so 14 minus 7 is 8? Right, I'm not like, what do you get 8? I mean, there's no logical reason why you come with 8. Then we went to multiplication and division. So we memorized all the answers to the multiplication tables. We got to the little things at the learning center, right? Where it's got the whole thing, right? And then we got to this, okay, so if 5 times 3 is 15, what is 15 divided by 5? $11? Right, and it's like, what is 11 based on, right? And so that's what we did until the point where she stopped asking me to help her with her homework. Okay? And put the burden on my wife. Okay, so now you fast forward, and she in October is qualified to, not that she's going to get a learner's permit. So she's paying attention to some of the car commercials differently now. And there's some, I think it's the Subaru one, where the father is teaching the son to drive the old Subaru in a stick shift, and it's like, right? And so as we're watching this, she says, so Dad, when it comes time for me to learn how to drive, I don't want you to teach me. I want Mom to teach me. Okay? And I'm like, why? I'm a good driver. I've been just like, because you're too impatient. Okay? So this is hanging over me. Then I'm talking to my associate at Fuller, Daniel, who comes to our church. And he goes, do you know when you talk about your daughter, she's not even in the room? Not all the time, but oftentimes you sound annoyed. I'm like, I do? And he's like, just give me a little feedback. Right? I'm like, did I ask for that feedback? Right. So again, limitation. And then I had to kind of, the shame of, really, I communicate annoyance when I talk about who I love? Right? Who I'm very proud of. So it feels terrible as someone who went through this as a son to now be doing it as a father. And so my audacious outcome is that I would improve, that my daughter would actually enjoy me helping her, okay? But I can't push myself into this. So 2 weeks ago, she came to me for help. Very out of character. Based on the last 8 years, okay? Why? She's a freshman at a Christian high school. She's been assigned her first exegesis paper, okay? This is stuff we learned in seminary. This is taking a really hardcore look at a passage of Scripture and actually coming up with what does this mean and how do you live this out? So she's feeling very overwhelmed by this assignment. Most freshmen in high school you would probably feel overwhelmed, right? So, Dad, now, I figured this is a lot for her to ask for help. She must be really desperate, okay? Right? But my audacious outcome was already, if I am given another opportunity to help her, I am going to try to reach into some other part of myself so that I don't sound annoyed, I don't sound impatient, but I really have to not be annoyed and not impatient, okay? And so I go, what? She says, Dad, I've got this exegesis paper, and they told us how to do it, but I don't know where to start, okay? And so I gave her this passage, Luke 7. This is one of my favorite passages in the Bible. Now, again, I picked this passage because I breathe this passage. It's just so easy for me to kind of rest in this patiently because there's so much in this passage that I appreciate, okay? And so she had done her first attempt, and it was very scattered, and she knew enough that it wasn't good. And she was being overwhelmed with how she organizes all this research that she's finding in commentaries and observation, right? And it's just like, ah! So I said, okay. I sat down. I didn't stand up. Normally I'm standing up, right? So standing up, and I'm only here for a moment. I sat down with her at the table, and I said, all right, I sense that and I really tried to not have a tone, right? I was like, I sense that you're frustrated because you don't know what to do with everything that you're finding. And how do you even know where to start? How do you organize this? Yeah, I said, so I know you came to me with the pressing need to actually write the exegesis paper, but I want to teach you very quickly a way to organize your thoughts in a nonlinear fashion. I said, I just taught this last night to my graduate students, okay? Right, now, then she gave me annoyance. That's not what I'm asking you to teach me, right? So where'd she learn that from? Me, okay. So I was like, Dad, I'm on this schedule, and it's like, okay, give me 2 minutes, okay? So I taught her solar mapping. So I said, all right, so let's draw this circle, and in the circle, write what's the moral of this passage? We've already talked about that. So she says, oh, well, it's like the amount that we love is based on the amount that we know we're forgiven, right? With a lot of people miss. So I go, that's great. All right, so let's keep that in focus, and now let's just draw rays of the sun based on the different characters in the story. Here's Simon, here's the woman who came in and cried on Jesus' feet, right? And here's Jesus. And then what are the things that you're learning? And you don't have to organize it on a page like it flows yet. You're just brainstorming, right? And so she starts doing this, right? And then the light starts to slowly come up on her, and she starts putting more things on and sub-rays of the rays. And then she goes, hey, Dad, can't we make a second solar map that's just about Simon? Right? And I say, sure, because maybe there's so much about Simon. And I said, and the beauty of this is you don't have to use everything that you just write down, but you don't have to stop writing it down. And so after a while, she's like, this is really helpful, right? And it's like, And yeah, and then she says, man, I said, you know what, Janessa? I just taught this last night. Some of my graduate students still don't even know how to do this. I said, good for you, man. I said, that's great. She said, so go away. So it's like, I need to apply this now. I said, okay, right? So I was so proud of her. She actually learned this thing from me, but she was more open to learning it because I was more patient with her. And so she had to get past her impatience and annoyance, which she learned from me, to actually realize this has value. Okay, so 2 days goes by, she's done the solar mapping, and she's now started to block out her whole exegesis paper, and she calls me back in. And she's like, Dad, I've blocked it out, but I want to see what you think. Again, that's a victory right there, right? Not to criticize her. And so, man, I saw so much to be proud of. I was like, man, that's good. And then she got to the end of the paper, and you're supposed to say, so what is your conclusion and whatever. And she came up with the same kind of conclusion that I've come up with probably 80% of my life, but based on where I'm thinking now, it's the wrong conclusion, okay? And this is what we're talking about in my class that Pete's in, okay? And I said, so you ended this exegesis paper like, let's not be like Simon. Because Simon didn't love this woman, and that's because he didn't experience God's forgiveness. I mean, that's correct. I said, but what I'm learning is, what does this teach us about Jesus? Right? Because otherwise, let's try harder not to be, and that's a shaming voice. Let's try harder not to be so much like Simon. I said, no. The conclusion is Jesus loved Simon as much as he loved this woman. And I said, do you think that Simon will never have a judgmental thought again? Were he ever going to think he's better than somebody else? And he's like, I said, so let's think about that for yourself. I said, you know that God sees everybody just the same. Right? He's like, yeah. I said, but do you ever feel like just the same? And she's like, oh. I said, is there anyone in the youth group that they've made some mistakes, they made some bad choices, and you haven't made the same mistakes? And I go on record as your father, I'm glad you haven't. Okay? But at the same time, just making that comparison, do you immediately go, so God must love me more? My parents must love me more because I'm not made the same mistakes. I said, see, we all do that. I said, Simon's going to be wrestling with this the rest of his life, but Jesus, it could be healthy shame. It could be unhealthy when it's like, oh, I'm not perfect, so Jesus hates me. It's like, no, Jesus wants you to be better, but he gives you an eye space. And so her conclusion was very different because it focused on Jesus and what he does and not Simon and how Simon has to try harder.